to try and do something, because it's easy just to sit back and not do anything. I could be easy at home, taking easy, going shopping, getting caught up in worldly affairs, but I think the reward for dealing with the halal issue and sorting it out is very high. So my personal drive and the motivation is to serve Allah through serving my brothers and sisters that are around the world and in the UK. But in terms of what can you do to help us, to contact us, lend us your support. We have a poster, we're going to put a petition on there to lobby against the EU labelling legislation to force only unstunned meat to be labelled, so consumers identify it, and then we target to more demonisation, more, people see us as being barbaric, hot-headed. We're not, we're peace-abiding. It's only when we're provoked, and I think let's not get to the stage, let's coordinate ourselves, let's get together. If you generally want to make some changes and protect your halal diet, we would love to have your support, information, advice, just spreading the word out, providing information. So if, for example, I've given you some good advice, the idea of having the website address is there, let's put it on there, let's share it with everybody else. It's there, it's excellent, dawah work, it's really good sadaqah, excellent charity work, and inshallah, the intention is to help people.
At the moment, the organisation is funded through members.
Yeah, the website's been funded charity donation, so that was the only reason it happened.
So you're registered charity?
We're not registered as charity, we're registered as a non-profit making organisation.
Okay.
We're limited by guarantee, so that means there's no money to be made.
Right.
But all the work we're doing, if it's any campaign work, people donate, and it'll happen. So we want to do a lot more, but we're restricted by money. So people around the world have got fun, they have money. Let's put it in a cause where you can make changes in terms of protecting a halal diet, but also about improving our sort of food in terms of the quality, but also in terms of helping those who are less fortunate and who haven't got the capacity or the education or the tongue or the voice to communicate this to other people.
Right.
If we've got people who are willing to come out, if they're solicitors, if they're health experts, people like myself, I'm a food expert, let's get together. That doesn't cost money, and we can do things, but if those people have got money and we want to do an educational drive, or if we want to do a campaign, it needs money for it to happen, because people have to be paid. So that's why I'm limited, otherwise there's a lot of ideas, a lot of work to be done, inshallah.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time.
Sorry, it's a bit late.
Okay, sorry, it's good.
So you can see where cancerous cells go and will show up in UV light. This year, a new chapter of GM started. We've moved along from genetically modified plants into now genetically modified animals. And I think this is giving some people a great deal of concern. And here we have an Atlantic salmon that has been genetically modified, and this is called the Advantage salmon. Those two salmon are actually the same age. And as you can see, one has reached market weight in some 2 years, when in actual fact the smallest salmon would take 3.5 years to create. You can see the huge physiological effect that this has had on the salmon. If this was a drug, it would have to go through a huge amount of testing for this to be accepted. It is approved today in the US. I would like to say on this slide that the Atlantic salmon that have been genetically modified are all purported to be sterile and female, but if we talk to environmentalists, then there could be between 3 and 5% which are perhaps viable. In other words, they could reproduce in the wild. And the concern is that this particular fish could get out into the wild, and what they already know about it, it is a much more aggressive predator in the wild than the conventional salmon. It is, of course, raising certain religious issues, and that is, of course, what we're here today to focus on. And all I am here to do is to present some of these technologies. It's not up for me to decide upon them, that's yours. But what I can say is that whilst there's a great deal of discussion about stunning, non-stunning, these issues are coming towards the Muslim sector and must be thought about because they are equally as big and will affect a much greater range of products that we consume today. One question is, well, how can we improve on what God created perfect? I think that is a central question. If you take, for example, the Chinook salmon and take some DNA from that, which you would say would be halal, and this ugly creature is really ugly, it's called an ocean pout, and they took the DNA from that because it is containing an antifreeze gene. And some would say, well, that is halal. Others would say it's haram because it is a fish without scales. And you're inserting that into the Atlantic salmon to create the advantage salmon. The question is, what is that? Is it halal? Is it mushroom? Is it haram? I don't know. It is certainly a fish with scales, but as a spectator, it's a little bit like having some pork DNA in my chicken. So I'll leave that one with you. There are other concerns surrounding other crops, and there's a whole long list of crops and fruits and vegetables which are on the workbench being genetically modified. And there are derivatives of those products as well that are used as ingredients. So it's a very big issue. Okay, moving quickly along to what cloning is all about. It was in the news recently. How many of you have a pet at home? Maybe your kids have a favourite pet. What would they like? Maybe you would like to have this pet reborn when it dies. Well, there is some news here. This has already been done. This is no longer science fiction. There is a company in America called Biogen where they will take some DNA ready for the animal to be cloned. And here we go. 2008, obviously this has got to happen in the States, of course, but we have here a woman who has had her pet pit bull terrier called Huda recreated for the princely sum of about $150,000. Why? Probably best known to this lady. Now, you don't need me to tell you how we reproduce. Except that there are 2 copies of DNA present in every one of us, one from our mother and one from our father. The cells grow and they divide, and an embryo develops a baby, or a sheep is born. So what's cloning? Well, cloning actually does exist in nature. Some plants reproduce by cloning. There are twins. We all know people who are twins. They are, in fact, if you like, clones. But in actual fact, cloning is what we would call asexual reproduction. No sperm is involved in this process, and it produces a genetically identical copy of the original animal. And hopefully this works. So here you take you empty out the DNA from the egg cell donor, you put in the full complement of DNA from the donor, a little bit of an electrical shock there to get things going in the lab. It's then inserted into the surrogate mother, and hey presto, eventually a clone of the original animal is born. And you can see this particular sheep has a black head and black feet. This one just black feet, and the reason we've got that all over there is because that is an exact copy of the original donor. This isn't new. This has been happening for almost 60 years when a tadpole was first cloned. This is how it all started. And then in 1995, Morag and Megan, which are down here on the right, they were the first 2 sheep which were cloned. And they were cloned from an embryo. But everybody knows about Dolly the sheep, which was born in 1996. And the thing about Dolly was she was created from the complete adult DNA taken from the udder of another sheep. And of course, more recently, other creatures have been cloned. So Dolly was produced by the Roslin Institute in Scotland. It may come as a bit of a surprise, but it took 230 attempts to get it right. There were animals born inside out, there were animals born with 3 ears and things like this. So only one went on to create Dolly, and in fact was put down due to arthritis and progressive lung disease in 2003. Dolly was born at the age of 6. And because of that, Dolly was, if you like, suffering from old age diseases at a very early stage. That's Dolly today. She's in a museum if you want to go and see her. And, so she's quite famous. But there are some uses of cloning, and I think people do recognise that there are perhaps therapeutic benefits from cloning. Reproductive cloning, well, that's just going to create cloned animals. Therapeutic cloning is, of course, using embryonic stem cells. Stem cells, as you may know, can form any part or any cell within the body, derived very early on in the embryonic stage, and can therefore be used to produce personalised stem cells. And this would mean that there would be no fear of rejection. Benefits. They actually range from creating dogs that are easier to train, feeding the world, where we've heard that one before in the genetically modified food story, and also the potential to create a clone from same-sex partners. For cows, it's possible to produce, as they have already done, mastitis-resistant cows, which obviously have some benefits with respect to antibiotic treatment, but also meat with altered fat composition, recreating yields which are the highest yielding in milk or meat quality. And of course, farmers are then able to reduce their costs. This hit the news earlier this year, just in August, and caused something of a furore here in England. This was in the States. It was reported, as you can see on the BBC, where something is created from dead animals. So here you're taking DNA from a dead animal, from a carcass, and you're reproducing it. All about producing the perfect steak. The trouble is that the animal has to die first of all. In other words, you've got to kill it, and then you've got to cook it, and then you've got to eat it to decide whether it was actually any good. And then you clone from the animals that tasted particularly nicely. What's the situation here? Well, it came as a bit of a surprise that some cloned animals were already in the food supply chain. 8 cows with a cloned mother were born in the United Kingdom, and the Food Standards Agency reported that 2 of the male offspring of the cloned cattle were slaughtered. The first was slaughtered in 2009, and meat entered the food chain, and that, of course, will have been eaten. The second was slaughtered in the middle of this year, and that was then stopped from entering the food chain. Whilst the male may be particularly vociferous on a number of aspects, I'm afraid, this is what people read. I have a fair amount to do with all the major retailers, and they will tell me this is what people read. That is their reality.